gentlemen, nice to see you for episode 33 of the Fireside Chat, special episode with Jonathan and Andy and myself, where we answer questions about our upcoming book, Eyrbyggja Saga, or many other pronunciations that could walk us through.
Yeah, it would all be a mess no matter what.
And tonight is a special format where we will be taking mostly questions from our audience. So hopefully everyone that showed up here has questions for us, because we don't really have very big agenda besides just talking about what we're planning on doing, who maybe some of the characters are, and what did we start talking about before we went live? Oh yeah, the subtitle. We need a subtitle for this.
Yeah, and we were discussing it's impossible to figure out how to spell it for the average person. Hard to search for, hard to explain what the heck it is. So yeah, a subtitle that would make it really pop.
Yeah, so we were thinking, what, Viking Saga, would that work? If someone said, all right, what did you write? What was the book you wrote? And we said, Eyrbyggja Saga, subtitle Viking Saga. Would that be something sufficient enough for them to find it in a bookstore?
I think the word certainly is good. Got to sneak Viking in there somewhere.
Yeah.
We do, but the saga appears twice.
I wouldn't say
Yes,
saga
that's true.
twice.
Yeah.
Eyrbyggja, a Viking saga.
Well, you could say a Viking story.
Viking story.
That's not terribly sexy though, but
Graphic novel?
Once Upon a Time in Iceland.
Like that.
Eyrbyggja Saga.
Fear and Loathing in Iceland.
Oh, that's good too.
well, depending on how many beheadings and missing limbs get on the page, you can call it a graphic Viking novel.
And does get graphic. Yeah.
Graphic Viking novel.
How many Icelandic sagas don't get graphic? I mean, you and John have done so many that you can probably rattle them off.
I mean, there have been a few where there are very few killings, but that's pretty rare to find a saga where they're not someone's not getting stabbed or sliced in half or losing their head or being pierced through or all the things that happen in the sagas that make them so entertaining. But yeah, every once in a while you'll run across one where the body count's pretty low.
Yeah, agreed. So yeah, I think we need to work in definitely the word Viking, but I like the idea of just something that's a little pop culture-ish, like Once Upon a Time in, or Fear and Loathing in, something like that kind of brings it more out of the, maybe let's just say, like, takes us out of the crowd of academic translations into something a little bit more pop culture of a translation.
I like doing that.
That is not my area of expertise. I'm the guy that's going to be bringing this all down and making it more boring by trying to stick to the text as close as possible because I love them so much.
That's awesome, and that's why I love to have you on this project with us. Because everything we try to do is try to be as authentic as possible. With Jonathan, we're trying to bring out the flavor of the humor as well.
Yes, exactly.
So let's talk about maybe the first 3 pages. If we don't have any questions from the audience just yet, Andy, you had some feedback on the first 3 pages. Why don't we just talk about them?
Talk about that, yeah.
Yeah.
So so what do we want to say there? Just little tiny things. So for example, on the first page we have I like that we have Snorri as our storyteller. I think that's a smart move. You could also do Ari the Learned, who is kind of the father of all of this stuff too. But I like Snorri and having a storyteller, and I'd like to make sure that storyteller pops in and is in charge of the story every once in a while. We see him. So in the first page, little thing that I would correct, for example, in the, I think it's like the second panel in the thing, I might have that wrong, but right in the middle of the page when the castle, right? So I was looking at that and say that looks like a medieval castle, which isn't appropriate for Norway in that time. So I want you to change that to like a nice mead hall that would fit the period and the place a little bit better, something like that. And then other things I was thinking about was more textual, like his. So this is a conversation that we need to have, and it's maybe interesting for some people to listen in on this. I love the picture of King Harold as this wild and crazy, almost childish looking maniac. That you've got. He's a very humorous looking character in there. But the story of where he gets his nickname is it's pretty ingrained in the Norwegian kind of legend, right? I don't think we need the part about a woman who he's trying to impress, but I do think it's important to recognize that his oath is not to cut his hair or comb his hair until he is king of all Norway.
It's like an
Getting
NHL playoff beard. It's like
Yes,
for
that's
good luck,
exactly
right?
right.
It's the
It's
kind of
exactly
thing
right.
where she
Until we win
says,
it all, I'm
yeah,
not cutting this beard.
yeah, because the woman
Exactly
basically
right.
says you can't have me as your wife until you've basically conquered all of Norway and prove yourself a real man. And then
That's right.
he goes off on this rampage, and
Yeah.
he realizes maybe he cuts his hair once and loses a battle and goes, oh wait a minute,
Yeah.
I can't cut my
So I
hair
mean,
again.
there is this potential in there, and this is something that Andrew and I were talking about a little bit earlier. Is how do you get all of the context that make the saga really pop into a text that is, we have a kind of a page limit that we're aiming for, and how do we condense this very very complicated story into something that is consumable and producible and won't cost $1 million. Um, Something that John and I, when we've worked on Saga Thing, if you ever listen to the early episodes, we try to keep it really tight and we skip things. And now we kind of just tell the whole damn story. And the episodes are 2 hours long because there's just so much to tell. I don't know how we're going to condense all of that. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, so Jonathan, one of the things that Andy was mentioning was this might be a two-parter for
Hmm.
Eyrbyggja. If we want to tell the story properly, it might be a two-parter. Yeah, so this is what we're going to try to work out. And we've got like a
Yeah.
working session scheduled for tomorrow, 7 p.m. So the
Nice.
we'll see how we get the pacing worked out because that was one of my concerns is
Yeah.
and some of these things we can get really creative. Like Jonathan did a wonderful job. I think it was page 3, which
Yeah.
is
Page
just
three.
where the guy needs to go
Oh,
and kill the pirates for the
Hmm.
king, and he just goes off and starts killing them. Then he goes like, no, why am I killing you guys? We should party and let's get together and drink. And then next thing you know, the
Yeah.
king's like, what the hell happened to my assassin? And
Yes.
I want his lands, you know. And so all of that, there was a lot of text there, but everything's just synthesized into one big flow of imagery.
Yeah,
yeah,
which
I
is very medieval.
like doing
I
that.
like that move.
Yeah, I like doing like the more things we could tell like visually because it is a visual medium. Like
Hmm.
we can play a lot with that. That's fun.
Yeah. What was I gonna the on that page? I think on that page is a great opportunity for Snorri to come in and set the stage just a little bit because we have a transition there from Harold, the mission that Harold sends him on, to where he is. He's actually sailing to the Hebrides and he's in the Hebrides, right? So it would be good to have Snorri either just a text box, like one of those scrolls that you have where you know that the storyteller is speaking, something there to indicate that he set sail for the Hebrides and found. And then the visual tells you kind of everything that's happening there. That he becomes friends with these people. He actually he marries into that family and sets himself up really nicely. Not what Harold was looking for at all.
Yep. And then two of them have to flee. Basically, I think that's where we're at. Like where page 4, where he needs to take off.
Yeah. Oh, so that was the thing that I was saying was like, that echoes our problem, right? So we're trying to condense everything, and this is the same thing that happens with John and I trying to do the saga thing. Basically, what we've got in those 3 pages is the first page of the saga.
Mm-hmm.
So the saga is over 100 pages long, and we've taken 3 pages for 1 page of material. How does that all flesh out in the end? We've got to do some serious cutting and reorganizing in order to make it really work.
Yeah, but I think this one, I couldn't see us cutting that. I mean, that had to really be there to set the tone.
I agree.
There's no
I
way we
agree.
could have cut
And
that and started somewhere else in the saga.
yeah, and like you and I were talking about just a little bit before, it's going to be really important as we arrive in the land of air in Iceland. We're going to need to lay out who are the different factions that exist there, they're all going to die within a chapter or two. And that's the problem is sagas are generational. They tell a
Yep.
generational story. And so that generation is going to kind of play out over the course of a couple chapters until they get to the main story, which is the story of Snorri Gothi and Arnkill. And that's going to be the center of the story, I think.
Yeah, and that's where I was kind of wrestling with the fact that I was starting to write up all those people that are going to be in that battle and they're going to die on Poop Hill, and or Thorvaldsness, the mountain, and is it worth having all of these faces generated by Jonathan in terms of unique characters because they're not coming back, right?
Right now.
Or is it just like generic, red shirt Viking 1 and generic red shirt Viking 2 because they're
I
not
think there's gonna be a
beaming
lot of
back
that.
aboard, right?
Yeah.
Um, and
Because
so,
even reading that early section where they are in Iceland and Thorolf Malsterbeard has established Helgafell and what's so important about it, you've got a lot of characters and the Kjallaclings, Kjallak the Old and all of his descendants. They're all pushing back against the people of Thorsness,
yeah,
and you don't need to know who every single person is in the visual medium. We can have generic faces in there, but we do need a couple of grounding characters.
yeah. But one thing that we probably want to do is have each one of the families have some sort of visual characteristic. So when you see one of
Hmm.
their descendants, there's that
Uh,
visual cue that says, this guy is part of this line. Oh, and this guy's part of this line. Whether it's clothing, a hat, a nose or ears, or some sort of
Yeah.
physical characteristic that we don't need to. The person doesn't need to go. Oh, okay, this guy's part of the clan, and I
mhm.
need to remember that name. And okay, so he's related to. Let me flip back to this previous page because it's a visual medium, and we can
Yeah.
over exaggerate something that's kind of really
Hmm.
silly. That people can start doing that association.
Yeah. Well, one question that I would want to get an answer from for the audience would be when you have a saga with a lot of characters, do you in a graphic novel form, would it be helpful to have either a glossary, just a two-page glossary of names, the really important ones, or would you like a family tree that's kind of illustrated or something like that that would help you to keep track of everything that you can always flip to make sense of?
That's not a
I
bad
know that's
idea.
helpful for me in the book.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I love it when those saga translations have those family trees in the back, and even maps.
Hmm.
The maps are really
Yeah.
fun to see where the
Oh
saga
yeah.
took place and where everyone traveled.
Where they
Uh,
bounce around. Yeah.
yeah. So, chat if you guys have an opinion on that, let us know because we can always save a page or two for family trees. You can put it on like a back cover or something like that. Just
Hmm.
quickly always flip back to the back cover and see. Ooh,
That's right. Yeah.
it's
And,
Jonathan's
well,
sketching
I
fabs
know.
away
And that's
for
why I
you
want to
Yeah,
ask
guys.
doodling a
Jonathan.
little bit. I don't know what else to contribute at the moment.
Well, Jonathan, I'm curious, like in terms of character design, what what's driving your character design? Are you looking into the saga and reading about that character, or are you kind of just whatever comes to mind? I know, like your Kettle Flatnose, he has that fur that he's wearing. He's clearly got a smushed up nose.
Yeah.
How do you arrive at what the character is going to look like?
So for the ones that we've done so far, like just reading kind of like what they do in the pages we have in the story, and then doing a little bit of like look up into seeing like what were people wearing back then because I'm not a expert in like Icelandic history, so for me it's a little bit interesting to have to like find like pictures on the internet and say like, well, what's like period really.
Yeah,
um and I don't know, I thought for the bear skin on his head just felt right. It's like, yeah,
yeah.
he'd wear a
Well,
bear
it's
skin.
makes him
He's a bruiser.
it's
He's
very clearly him. He's
Yeah, he's like a
easily
brawler.
identified. Yeah, except he's going to die very soon. So he's like
Well,
you got this iconic image of this guy, and he's gonna as soon as they get to Iceland, he's like he's out of here.
uh,
But he sets things in motion, which is good.
yeah, you still want him to have like a good character because like
Yeah,
if he's just generic, I feel like people don't care as much when the characters die or something happens to
right.
them. Like there's a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, and I think
Like
he's got a good entrance set up in there, where Harold asks for this guy, and then that first panel where you see him,
Yeah.
um, it's really striking.
But
oh,
this
thanks.
is not what I do. But
Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, which captures it really nicely. Um, So, do you have plans for Snorri Gothi, the kind of star of the show?
Is that the guy telling the story?
No, no, he's that guy's actually named after the
Yeah,
main character of the
All right,
story.
that's a
I might be a little
descendant.
confused. Oh, he's the descendant. So in
He's the
that case,
descendant.
we were talking about having similar features
Hmm.
to denote. I'd probably keep probably the nose, like that
I
kind of like
agree.
pointy nose and that face shape,
Skinny,
and
Yeah,
maybe
like bony, skinny.
yeah, a
Because
little bit like
he's a schemer,
Ymir.
right? He's a schemer
yeah.
throughout the saga.
He's
He's not the
conniving
brawler.
schemer. He's
Yeah.
not a fighter. He sends other people to fight for him. But he's really really intelligent. He's wise. But yeah, he plays everybody. So that's something there.
Yeah, so we can definitely play that up with the families. Just have that kind of bone structure that none of them are really big boned. There's
Mhm.
all small boned, and that'll actually make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he's got a sister or half sister named Thordis who should be very sultry in the
Ooh.
depiction of her. Based on not just what happens in Eyrbyggja Saga, although that she plays a decent role in there. But if we're gonna jump to Gisli Saga, which I think should be the next one, that would be the logical next step, I think. She plays a good role there, and she has a lot of boyfriends. That woman, and she causes all kind of trouble. So I think definitely make her a more kind of seductive figure
Oh,
because
see,
that's how
so
she's
she
drawn.
appears in another saga as well. You're saying?
Yeah, in fact, there's a whole large section of this saga that is kind of folded in with Gisli Saga,
Okay.
and so a lot of the sagas overlap. Depending, once you get into the same region, you get stories that tell similar. They fill in a lot of the gaps of the history and the stories that are being told, and so you get the whole story of what's going on with Snorri Gothi's family,
Okay.
what's happened before, where he's headed. So you start to understand a little bit more of his motivations based on what his family has been through. But you wouldn't know that from reading just Eyrbyggja Saga. You've got to read Gisli as well.
I got a little sketch as we were talking, like so like if this is Snorri the narrator,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe give him kind of like a similar look or something like this, like to change the
Yeah,
hair up.
Oh yeah, I
Keep
like
it
the
like
long banana nose too, like the Mr.
yeah.
Burns. Mr.
yeah,
Burns, excellent, excellent.
yeah. He's definitely
Susie,
not
eh?
trustworthy.
Yeah.
You're going to need to age him, of course, because in the
Yep.
very beginning he's going to be young and he's going to
Hmm.
trick his stepfather into giving him the farm and all that kind of stuff. But then he's going to grow and become. By the end, he's going to. I like that receding hairline that he's got in that sketch. That'll work a little bit. The adult version of Snorri.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good evening, Battle Reed. Welcome to the chat. So we've thrown out a couple of questions for you guys during the stream so far. I don't know if you just joined us now. Two of the questions. First one was, would you find value in a family tree slash like a map at the back of the graphic novel to help you center yourself on who's related to whom in this very crazy and wacky Icelandic saga that has a lot of characters in it.
Yeah.
And then
Or like a cast of characters like you'd see at the beginning of a play. That could also be really useful with a little like circular picture right next to it, so you get a sense of who they are.
yeah, they said that could definitely help teach their
Oh,
kids.
that's great. There you
There
go.
you go. Look at
So
that.
we're looking at a younger Snorri and an older Snorri.
Just
Snorri
a
Gothi.
rough mock up. These might change a little bit too, but like this
Sure.
is just to get started.
I think that can work.
Yeah, I totally like it. And then the second question we had for our audience was because this is a Q and A evening, so we're kind of just talking away about the project until you guys throw us some questions. It's mostly going to be driven by you guys tonight. And it was subtitles for the book. So there's a bunch of books already titled Eyrbyggja Saga that you can go find in a bookstore. But once we go live with this book, we're going to need a subtitle, or even like invert it. We'll need a title, and then Eyrbyggja Saga becomes a subtitle of this title, I guess. So
Yeah.
we're throwing it out there to the audience in terms of any ideas. We're still
If you
early in the
want to
process.
if you want a strictly English translation of Eyrbyggja Saga, it would translate to the story of the air dwellers or the people of air. that's not very sexy either. So I don't think we're going to go in that direction.
It'd be like Last Airbender. People would be putting us in with
Yeah, if we could jump on that, that would be great. But I don't think it's a good fit.
customers would be like, I don't understand what's going on. They're a whole different cast of characters.
Who are all these people?
Yeah, so tonight, basically, if you guys have any questions about this upcoming graphic novel that we're working on, we're basically working through, we've got the first 3 pages done. And it's a long one. And one of the challenges is going to be, how do we break this up? How do we, streamline it? And one of the things that we were talking about is getting the visual medium to work for the reader, is to have each one of these lineages have very, very physical defining characteristics that you can follow the characters along without having to memorize a bunch.
Yeah, I think we have, something
That's
that we can work with is that
difficult.
the sagas are very episodic, and so one of the challenges that we have to face, but I think is doable, is breaking the saga itself up into episodes that we think are most important for telling the story, and then building around that.
Right. Battle Reed says it's difficult to make Eerie seem sexy, lol.
Yeah, I agree.
And he just said he's just started breaking into the Icelandic sagas. So yeah, you can get them on their own, like in their own little booklets like this, or there's
Yeah.
there's compilations.
If you're looking at this one, I've got it here.
All
The
right.
Sagas of Icelanders. Yeah, you got the more recent version. This is the older version, but they're the
Yeah,
same thing.
so it's
The
it's
Penguin
thick.
version.
There's a lot of sagas in here.
Yeah, this book is not terribly expensive, and it has a great introduction to some of the best sagas of Iceland. So it's a good starter. And if you finish reading some of these and you feel like you really like them, there's plenty more published by Penguin Classics that you can grab. And you can, of course, listen to Saga Thing,
Yes,
a brilliant podcast. It's the oldest medieval Viking podcast on the internet. So, and it's not terrible, I don't think.
two wonderful narrators that know
Sure.
their
Yeah,
thing, and they make it really fun.
we try.
Oh, he's going to Inks. Look at that.
Yeah, he's
The
showing us
wizard
the
at work.
process.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, one of the things in terms of writing, you've got the hauntings with the ghost seal, which is one of my favorites. But in order to
Me
do
too.
that, you have to introduce so many weird characters in order to get there, right?
It's worth
So
it.
it's not like
It's worth
it's
it.
definitely worth it.
There's
But
no
again,
way
it's
we're
one of the
cutting that.
challenges of balancing all of the different things going on in a saga and all the things you're expected as an audience to know who's who, what's going on, how is it all connected. There's all these threads. The sagas are so, I think, brilliantly written, and they expect so much of their audiences that it gives a good insight into what storytelling was like at that time period in this very special place.
And everyone
The
knew
rest of
everyone,
MIDI,
right? Back
yeah,
then, it's like it was oral tradition. You're telling these stories, and just like, oh
absolutely.
yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. All these people.
Yeah, and the things that are happening, I'm a quote unquote scholar of medieval literature. So I've read a lot of stuff from the continent. I'm an expert in English, Anglo-Saxon literature, and then a Viking, quote unquote Viking, Icelandic stuff. There's nothing else going on in the rest of Europe that's anything like the sagas. That's quite as brilliant as the sagas. They might be based on and inspired by things that are going on the continent, but they make it wholly their own in so many interesting ways. Um, they're really great to read, but it asks a lot of you as an audience in a way that other literature really doesn't.
Agreed. Yep, and that's why it's like a lot of this stuff inspired the RPG so easily. Like Saga
Hmm.
of Grettir the Strong, the Jom's
Yeah.
Vikings, the Varangian Guard. So many great
Hmm.
tales that just like the truth is stranger than fiction. You're like, what do you mean the Vikings were down in Constantinople as
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
emperor's elite bodyguard? People are like, you made this stuff up. Like, nope,
Right.
nope, this is all researched.
Well, and one of the things I think that lends them really well to the RPGs is that the sagas themselves, Viking culture, it's based on such a deep lore, right? every text is connected to another text, and there's all these stories and context that are so important to understand in order to appreciate the one thing that you're doing. And so it's a deep, deep world that you can dive into.
Yeah, and when you look at the poetic eddas, for example, the poetic eddas are disparate, but then as soon as you put it together with the prose edda starts tying all of that stuff together for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Snorri Sturluson does such a nice job of making that poetic Edda, which was written not long before he started, pursuing the prose Edda version. It makes all of that material that is supposed to be this older material, it makes it more accessible and turns it into a story that one can follow.
Yeah.
I can tell you from my students' experience, they still find it hard to follow, but I always tell them, well, be thankful you're not reading the prose Edda because this at least has a it might jump around a little bit, but it makes a whole lot more sense.
You
He's
mean
done a
the
good
poetic
job of,
edda? Yeah,
yeah, the poetic
poetic
edda
edda. Yeah.
is harder for them to understand.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and there's contradictions in there as well in the poetic edda.
Hmm.
That's one of the things that I had to do is actually address the contradictions and move some of the stuff into an appendix. Because for me, it was
Yeah,
like when I built out the illuminated edda, it was there to, have everything factually there in modern English, but also to be a reference guide for our Fate of the Norns universe. So
yeah,
we
yeah.
can't have contradictions or omissions in there. So I had to like pick
Hmm.
and choose, like what are we going to go with? Are we going this version of the story or this version of the story? And
Yeah,
so, you had the Saga of the Volsungs and the Saga of the Nibelungs, right? And so,
yeah.
same tale. Now, which one are we going with?
Hmm. Yeah. And I thought it was interesting with your illuminated Edda how you moved beyond the Edda and started tapping into all these other stories that help to contextualize what's going on. So you almost became the modern Snorri Sturluson, taking these old stories and trying to make them accessible by adding more context from other sources, bringing it all together. That's exactly what medieval authors were doing. People like Snorri Sturluson.
Yeah,
So that's pretty cool. A nice connection.
yeah, because I found it was really odd that you'd have like Odin's teachings right at the beginning of most of the poetic Eddas, where
Yeah.
you notice that he goes through a lot of follies in his stories and he's learning a lot himself through a lot of his own experiences. And so it
Yeah.
makes sense to have the Havamal at the very end or near
Hmm.
the end of the Edda, where he's actually learned a lot and now he's teaching it and imparting this knowledge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is kind of like a lot of my chronology that I had to work into that as well. Um,
Yeah, my students are always struck by Odin's character because obviously they're coming to, especially nowadays, they're coming to a class where we're talking about Norse mythology. They're coming to it from Marvel movies, and that thinking about who Thor is. Well, there's always a great conversation about who Thor is in the films and who he is in the text. And they're always disappointed. They're like, "Who is this brute?" I say, "Well, he's a brute in the very first Thor movie. If you look at the very beginning, that's the problem that he has to overcome in order
Yay!
to become a modern hero, right?"
I thought
But
go ahead,
they're
sorry.
always shocked by the Odin character. They're expecting a more complete character from Odin, especially if they've just read something about we usually start with Greek mythology or something like that, and they're seeing Zeus in action, and he's complete and in power, and he knows who he is. Odin is really a character who is struggling to discover who he is and discover how the world works around him and what his fate might be and how to avoid that fate.
And he's
And so his is
obsessed,
one. Yeah, he's
obsessed with
got
his
this
fate.
character arc that's great. I think it's great, and I love that he dies. Spoiler: he dies in the end,
Or does he?
or does he? He
Dun,
can't
dun, dun.
avoid his own fate, and that's the lesson that he ultimately has to learn, and that we as human beings also have to learn. I
Yep.
think that's good stuff.
And there's a lot of things with mythology that's messy. For example, like how many times does it bug you to go, why the hell does Loki and Heimdall they basically run at each other at Ragnarok on Vigrid and they
Yeah,
kill each other, right? And then you scour the material. There's absolutely nothing that indicates that there's any animosity between them beforehand. But
yeah,
there are hints at their personalities. If you understand their personalities and what they each represent, then you can kind of extrapolate where these guys could have been needling each other for
yeah,
years.
exactly.
Jonathan, it's
I want to jump
beautiful.
to Jonathan. Jonathan, on the lower corner, you just showed us that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Who is that? Because I haven't seen that character yet.
I don't know yet.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
making faces at this point.
There is a character named Bork the Stout, and
Is
that
it
is a
this
stout
guy?
fellow.
he is.
That guy right there, yeah.
Yeah,
Good kind
I
of
don't know if
idea.
that's Bork the Stout, but that's definitely a stout fellow. It could work.
I figure if I just doodle a bunch of random guys, like some of them will get recycled as characters, others might just be in the background, but like it's all part of it,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, yeah.
That might be a way to do it too. It's just a whole bunch of faces, and then we just put names on them. Go
Ooh,
on
that's
this.
a good one too.
Yeah, honestly, if you like just doodle a whole bunch of different people and then send them to me, I can start making matches for who fits
Hmm.
what kind of character.
Well, that'll be good. That's
Huh?
like casting.
Yeah, like casting, exactly right. Because the other option is for me to, have that list and Andrew to kind of work on our list and then create character descriptions for you so you know who they are. That might work too. I don't know what your process is.
I like doing a I'd like to try it this way. We're just drawing a bunch of characters. Like if I
Hmm.
vaguely know, like okay, tough guy, conniving guy, seductress, wizard, patriarch. Like if I just have like keywords to work with, like we can
You
go from
sure?
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's doable.
let's try it. Let's try it. Yeah, because we tried it the other way, and if this way is faster and gets the results, let's
Yeah,
do
yeah.
it. I'm totally
Yeah,
for it.
you won't see wizard, but you will see Thorgrima Witchface.
Yes, witch face,
What
exactly.
you could maybe try in your free time here to sketch out a woman named Thorgrima Witchface. What might she look like?
He likes the gentleman too.
Yes, she does. There's one of the problems. I was flipping through Eyrbyggja Saga today and putting a list together of characters and just thinking there's so many good ones.
Yeah.
Like some of them are in very short episodes. It's like one chapter or maybe two chapters, and
But
you
they're
have to do a lot of work to lay that out. But they're such good stories. It's hard to say no to.
It's almost like what we were just talking about, pulling a Snorri afterwards and tying them all together in a
Yeah.
our own creation afterwards. So think about this, if we ended up doing an Eyrbyggja saga in two installments, but then you've got all
Hmm.
these great dead end stories that never went anywhere, and then with
Yeah.
when we got the entire collage, we tie them back together with our own story arcs, finish those.
Mm,
That
yeah.
could be something that could be done as well because yeah, one of the things that I loved was two out of the three sagas that were found as manuscripts for the Poetic Edda, and they said in the second installment they will return as Kara the Valkyrie. And I was just like, oh my god, I gotta know how
Yeah.
this thing ends. And this manuscript has never been found. It's probably sitting around
No.
somewhere in the Vatican Library or something, and no one's
Yeah.
thought to look.
Or
And
something that happened to a lot of medieval manuscripts, especially if you're again, I'm more Old English and Old Norse stuff, but certainly in Anglo-Saxon England, as Anglo-Saxon England became Anglo-Norman England, as Anglo-Norman England became England, um, a lot of those old texts were kind of cut up and used as book bindings, and so every once in a while in the British Library, or in other libraries in England, they'll open up to rebind a book, and inside they will find little excerpts of very, very old materials. And so that's
ah,
one way you don't discover full text, but you discover little excerpts, little pieces of something that they decided, I don't know what this is. I don't care about it anymore. In the same way that you go through your own library and like, okay, I got to recycle this book and I'm going to use it for whatever I can. They're cutting up those old texts and using that for the binding of the new texts that are more
oh,
important.
that's crazy.
And so we lose a lot of stuff that way.
Huh. Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the Reformation, which
Oh yeah, that didn't
destroys
help.
so much material.
Could you guys imagine what you might find in the Vatican? Battle Reed says. I bet you there's tons of stuff that's sitting around just uncategorized,
I agree.
uncatalogued, that just got stored and
Yeah.
saved.
When I was a graduate student at the University of Connecticut, and I was reading the first time I read about Vikings in Constantinople and Vikings going down into Rome, I kept thinking there's so much interaction there. There's got to be great texts in the Vatican in particular. Records, not even like, not even sagas, just records of really interesting things.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be great to write a grant to just go and get permission to just hang out in the Vatican libraries and dig for Old Norse stuff. But, I had too many kids and stuff in grad school. And so I
Well,
never really got around to that.
just this year here in Montreal, there's an old nunnery that went up for sale. They closed it down
Yeah.
during COVID, and this real estate company bought it, and they had put up on Facebook Marketplace. They just took pictures, and there's just rows and rows and rows of bookshelves with ancient
Yeah.
books that look like they're like
Wow.
200 years old, maybe even 300 years old in this library. And I'm
Wow.
just like, do you guys have a list of the books that are there? Like, I would love to go in there. And they're like, well, it's
Yeah.
COVID. You can't go in there. And we don't have a list. We're just looking for anyone who'd want to just throw money at us. And we just package
Yeah.
this up and sell it as bulk.
And isn't that interesting? They don't have a list of what's in there.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
sure the Vatican has a pretty good list of what they've got, but they probably don't know everything that they've got
Yeah.
in there.
But this is just like a
I'm
Quebec.
looking.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at the drawings over here. That third one that you just did, Jonathan, that to me is Thorgrim a witch face.
Let's go up. This one?
Yeah, that one. I like that. Maybe a little bit less old, but not too much less old because she's the one they say you're gonna go stroke the old hag up the belly. I think that's the woman that that's said about. I like that drawing.
Made her
But the fact that she's
a little bit less old.
There you go. Yeah, that's Thorgrim a witch face to
can
me.
you make her witch face but give her like Elvira hair? What would that look like?
Give
Uh,
her Elvira hair. Yeah, we could do
Elvira.
that.
So it's a big wig, I guess,
Yeah.
and big other things. But that's
Yes. She's compensating
yes,
for the witch
yeah,
face.
Okay.
Oh man. So yeah, so I was just like, oh man, I can imagine there must be some really like gems of books in there. And maybe
yeah,
some old books on history and possibly even mythology. Like, oh man, it would have been like
yeah. Who knows?
dream.
Although,
So
what Andrew? What do nuns really read? I think we know, and it's not that entertaining.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised.
Well, I was trying to describe to my honor students this morning. They were disturbed by we were reading Chrétien de Troyes' Knight of the Cart, and they're disturbed by the promotion of adultery as any good Catholic of the Middle Ages should be.
Hmm.
They're disturbed by this love triangle between Arthur and Lancelot and Guinevere, and I was trying to describe for them some of the things that were happening in the Middle Ages at that particular time and what was going on with romance, some of the theological connections with romance literature, and how the King Arthur figure is a metaphor for God, and Lancelot is the human, and Guinevere is the Virgin Mary. And they're like, well, I don't understand. What are you talking about? How is that possible? But Lancelot becomes a better person through his worship or service to Guinevere, the Virgin Mary.
Hmm.
And in doing that, he serves God, Jesus, whatever, better. And this is one of the things that's kind of underlying some of the medieval romances that have these adulterous love triangles that are so weird, and they very much are weird. But they're also being written by clerics a lot of times,
Yeah.
and the clerics have to justify why they're writing this dirty, dirty literature.
Smut.
And yeah, and that leads to conversations about Julian of Norwich and then Marjorie Kemp, who both have these weird, fascinating love affairs with God that border cross the border to a kind of a sexual relationship that they desire. Students can't fathom that. I'm down in Mississippi. They're all Protestant. There's very few Catholics. This whole idea of a love affair with God is uh, very, very foreign to them,
Hmm.
but fun to introduce.
Sure. Got a beehive. That's awesome.
What's that?
Oh no, it's got Elvira hair now.
I like that second one. Both of those, it looks like she's trying. She
Yeah.
doesn't have much to work with, but she's
Yeah.
trying.
She's trying.
And
She's got
when
some vanity. She's got some
yeah,
vanity.
so when the boys come over to the house, which they do, she's putting herself together for those
Exactly.
visits.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something very funny about that. I would go that direct, even though it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think that's the it's appropriate for what we're going for here.
I like it. Awesome. Battle Reed says, I live in El Paso, very Catholic, makes getting chores done on Sunday very easy.
It's great.
All right, so who's chat? How many people do we have? 5 people in chat. Any other questions for us, guys, on Eyrbyggja Saga? Tonight is your opportunity to ask us about this Kickstarter book that's in the works. Literally in the works right now. Look at it.
Yeah, we're still creating and talking about what's possible. So you can drive the ship if you want for a minute.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got 3 pages done so far, so still a ways to go. And we're looking at just a graphic novel sized book in the end. Let's see. Whoops. What just happened?
Whoa.
The my connectivity that just went?
I think it was me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was me because I lost both of you guys there for a second. You guys are
Yeah,
both
you
back.
guys froze for a second, but you're back now.
Okay.
Is this too much vanity? Wait, where is it?
Where are you?
Too much vanity?
No, I like it.
Yeah, this one character, one of the guys that comes to the house, she really likes him. And so, you might have one of those images as he's leaving, and she's like, "Oh, what a guy!
Yeah,
I hope he comes back."
She's one of the memorable ones here.
Yeah, she is, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think she won best nickname in the Saga Think Judgment for.
Oh, did she?
Nice. I think so.
Was she one of your thingmen?
Mm-mm. No, I took for this saga. John hosed me because off mic he always talked about how much he didn't like Snorri Gothi, constant.
He was trashing him on the podcast too.
Yeah, exactly. And then when it came down to picking, I was sure I was going to get my favorite saga character, and he snagged him, and I was left with Arnkel, who is a better person than Snorri Gothi. But Snorri to me is an intriguing character. He's someone that I got very, very interested in at the very beginning of my exploration of the sagas, and so it was very tragic to lose him.
I can imagine. You should have picked the seal.
Yeah, yeah. My copy, I have multiple copies of Eyrbyggja Saga, but I don't think I have it right here. But the copy that I'm using to work on this is the same copy I read the first time in graduate school. It's got tons and tons of notes all throughout, lists of things in the margins and in the cover and the blank pages between, tons and tons of stuff in there just about my different ideas. But one of the things that I was working on at that time was how do sagas portray characters across sagas? So we know that these are written by multiple people across a century or two. How consistent are they? So if you think of like Marvel comic universe, Captain America
Not
is the same guy in every single one of them, right?
Well, they changed it around a lot of the backstory, especially Spider-Man. Like always,
no, I mean like I'm thinking specifically of the current movies that everyone's kind of familiar with, right? He's the same guy throughout those in multiple movies. He might appear in someone else's story, but he's the same guy, right? He has the same qualities and things like that. So what I was wondering about as a graduate student with Snorri Gothi, as I kept seeing him pop up in multiple sagas, was do they think of him? Is there a cultural perception of who this guy is? Because the sagas are being written hundreds of years after the events, hundreds of years after this guy existed.
Yeah.
Do they have a sense of who he is that is part of the cultural memory that's consistent across all the sagas? And what I found was, yeah, pretty much he is the conniving weasel who kind of gets his way. He's a good politician. He's good at getting things done. He's never going to fight himself. It's a fairly consistent portrait. I thought that was really interesting.
Nice. Yeah, that's one of the questions: is how much editorialization do you get in these sagas? And usually, there's quite a bit. The person that writes it has a lot to say when you got to needle the rival clan on the other side of the island that stole the whale blubber 2 generations ago, and they can't let it go.
Yeah, so like one of the things, most of the sagas find their origin in
a weasel.
A weasel.
You mentioned he's a weasel. Maybe there's a weasel sometimes when he's appearing, perhaps skulking around the back.
I'd have to look and see if weasels existed. I don't think weasels exist in Iceland.
No?
So,
all right.
No. So you're going to have to scrap that one. I don't think that they're there.
Fair enough.
But I like the idea. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, that's the big thing is that like what's in Iceland, what's available, what when you're thinking about what things look like
That was a
there.
big question.
Yeah.
Did they have forests back then when they first settled? You know, like were there big mature forests? Did everything get
Yeah,
deforested with the settlements? Right? We don't
yeah,
know.
But
yeah.
probably most of places though. So yeah, I would imagine. I don't know. I have to
So
look at.
yeah, there's a big sequence, big episode in Eyrbyggja Saga about access to a woodland
Battle Reed
because there
says
aren't
they had minks.
they had minks.
Yeah.
Not quite
Oh,
known
okay.
for their treachery.
I don't
So
know. The
maybe
same family.
same
Yes,
family, but
same family. Um, but yeah, there's going to be a big episode in the saga that is about access to forest land because wood is such a precious commodity. Iceland is so far north that even the wood that existed there, though they did have I wouldn't say forest, but they had woodlands
Probably be
available.
short.
Um,
Yeah, it wouldn't be tall
yeah, they're
trees.
shorter, and even if you go today, they've put a lot of effort into reforesting
Okay.
uh, Iceland.
Yeah.
But the trees that they have are obviously much shorter than your average tree. If you go to Snorri Sturluson's home in uh, Reykholt, there is a little copse of trees near the house, near his. Many people have probably seen his what do you call it, the his bath, his hot pool that's outside the house, where he could bathe. um, Near there is a bunch of trees, a whole bunch, and there's a little path that goes through the trees that's really beautiful, but the trees are not as tall as the kind of trees that we're familiar with. If we're thinking about a nice wooded pathway, these trees are going to be about half that size.
It's interesting though. What are the reforestation efforts? Were they actually done with seeds from existing trees that were there on the island, or these foreign trees that were introduced in the island
If I know
ecosystem?
Iceland, they're very big on historical accuracy and that idea of preserving what was.
Yeah,
I don't know the details of their reforestation efforts, but I would guess that it's things that existed before.
interesting
But
because like a genus of tree that grew there for generations or centuries or millennia would have a
yeah,
certain type of constitution against the weather, the elements, the wind, that would give it, an ability to grow in that kind of harsh environment.
exactly.
But if you start bringing like, I don't know, trees from Europe or trees from North America, well, they're going to have a hard time for the first couple of hundred years,
Yeah,
taking
yeah.
root there.
Well, I mean, one of the things that happened in the settlement age was that all these guys came over from Norway or from wherever, but a lot from Norway, and they're trying to recreate what they had in Norway. But Iceland is not the same place geographically, topographically, the weather, all of it's different. And so they were bringing over these herd animals, that just tore up the landscape. And not only were they cutting down trees to make their houses and to repair boats and do other kinds of things, so they deforested the place very, very quickly. They couldn't grow new stuff because the animals were tearing up the grasslands, tearing up the countryside, the hillsides where things were growing. All that stuff goes away, and then you have a problem of erosion. And next thing you know, you can't grow trees anymore because they're all gone. And that's kind of what a lot of the Icelanders of the period that we're playing with in Eyrbyggja Saga, that's the world that they're living in, where resources become a real hot commodity. Trees, access to wood
Yeah,
is
driftwood
really, really
just shows
important.
up and
Even
happy
driftwood.
times.
They
Yep.
get so excited about driftwood. You know things are bad when a piece of driftwood shows up and people are fighting to the death over that piece of wood.
Yeah.
um, you just don't have enough wood on your island. And so that's where that relationship with Norway is so important. And that's where that Greenland settlement and then going to Vinland
Yeah.
becomes really important because they're looking at Vinland as a great resource for wood
Yeah.
that's not controlled by the Norwegian crown or not controlled by some continental European crown. We can get wood all day here. Unfortunately, there are people living there that aren't so keen on
Sharing their
the
wood.
Viking presence. Yeah.
Their wood. All right, so we're coming up on almost an hour here, guys. So, any more questions for the team? We will have Stephen on tomorrow for you guys if you guys have any questions. Friday we have Philip Brucato from White Wolf fame who's going to be on, and Sunday we couldn't have Vincent on last Sunday for Saga the Firewolf. He'll be on this Sunday. Technical difficulty. Oh, that Discord always causing people problems. Jonathan almost couldn't make it tonight. Apparently, his age was rejected by Discord.
They didn't. He was too old or
He
too
looks
young.
he looks too old for a 7-year-old. Look at him
Yes.
growing a mustache.
I clicked. It was all. It was all my dates. I don't know what happened.
All right. There are no more. Well, thank you, gentlemen, guys, for coming out.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
It's an absolute blast. So we've got a couple of new workflows. We've got a couple of new characters in mind. And
Yeah.
anyone who's watching, like if you guys want to send us in the Kickstarter comments or I guess replies to our updates, any subtitles for this book, that would be fantastic. Battle Reed says it was a fun time. Yes, it was. Thank you for all your comments and interactions. You made the evening. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Score.